If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we begin to unravel the mysteries behind the origins, motives, and cultures of the 9 major vampiric bloodlines in the world of darkness. This episode will focus on the time-bending sages, the True Brujah. It has been quite some time since I have flexed one's mental muscles for you, neonate. I have heard whispers and rumours that you have found my teachings most helpful, and I hear that you have become quite the know-it-all in Elysium. First of all, rein it in. No one likes a know-it-all in Elysium that isn't the Harpy or the Prince. And second, between you and I, well done. Anyway, you came to me recently requesting to enhance your knowledge regarding the breeds of kindred that are not so common as the main 13, the Bloodlines. I asked you to write down which ones you've heard about, and it led to what I and other Canite scholars would call the major 9 bloodlines that you occasionally find in a domain. And, much to my surprise, the bloodline that has intrigued you the most are the True Brujah, the Brujah who claim to be descendants of the original antediluvian founder and not her diabolous child, Troil. It goes to show that even after some 2 millennia, things can still surprise me. But one cannot discuss the True Brujah within a void, however. One must start at the beginning, which means recapping a small portion about what we know about the Brujah proper. There is not a lot of information regarding the antediluvian. We know that she was embraced within the walls of the first city by either Irad or Enoch, most commonly known as Brujah. Some refer to her as Iles, others as Troil, who I already mentioned was her childer. Many scholars confuse the two for the same Canite, which is interesting for it is both wrong and correct. You see, Troil and Brujah are not the same Canite, but are the progenitors of the True Brujah clan and the main Brujah clan. Brujah had the reputation of being cold and passionless, a complete contrast to the main Brujah clan that you are familiar with tonight. She had no interest in human needs and the squabbles of the kind that she fed upon. She was a callous and fiercely logical kindred, siring a clan of equally dispassionate childer. Eventually, she would embrace a man called Troil. In comparison to his sire, he was hot-headed, filled with a fierce passion. And it may seem odd to you that Brujah would embrace someone who is the total opposite of herself, but you know what they say. Opposites attract. Yes. The antediluvian succumbed to the pettiest of all mortal emotions. Love. She wanted to taste his emotion, which I mean rather literally, not as some dirty innuendo. And whilst their relationship was remarkably passionate, I have no doubt, their love story would end in tears of ruby red, for Troil the rebel would diabolize his sire, sometime after the fall of the second city. No one is certain as to why this happened, a result of a bitter argument perhaps? Some would say that the hatred between the Venture and Brujah date back to this one moment in history, whilst others state that Brujah is actually still alive, escaping Troil with her unique discipline, Temporis, a frightening gift that allows one to manipulate and warp time around them. It is a discipline that the Brujah no longer possess, but the bloodline, the True Brujah, use. With the antediluvian eaten by Troil, gone was the large chunk of emotionless Brujah who monitored the world from the shadows, and born with a clan of rebels and thinkers, a clan who fought to change the status quo of their society. And thus were born Prometheans as you know them today, be it in a raw and unrefined state, many of which are still a great thinker, mind you. With that, you could argue that the True Brujah dealt poorly with the disasters. Ignorant of experiencing intense emotion regularly, dramatic and horrifying surprises create more confusion than might fall on the mind of vampires more familiar with passion. But what of the True Brujah? How do they differ from the majority of the Brujah? Well, they take after her, of course, her being the antediluvian herself, Brujah. They too are dispassionate and cold, even to the point where they find summoning emotions to be difficult. I have only ever encountered one during my undead life, and she could barely smirk. It was most disconcerting. The fall of the second generation would effectively split the Brujah in two. The True Brujah, who have said to have no part in the destruction of the second generation, did not taste the rage of their grandsires, the rage and the passion that infected the majority of the Brujah. It was most alienating to them, I'm sure, not caring much for the angst of the Bruja proper, or whether they were a clan or a bloodline. Now, you may be a tad baffled with the information I have just presented to you. Doesn't this all seem rather odd? The entirety of a clan spawning from one Methuselah, whilst the others just did nothing? On the presumption that what I've just told you about Troil is true, it would mean that the Bruja proper are significantly younger than most of the other clans, and these True Brujah just allowed it to happen. A breed of vampires who are said to control time itself were unable to predict the uprising of Troil and his descendants. Now, some would argue this is simply because the True Bruja were just scholarly Bruja that rediscovered the signature discipline Temporis, which would undermine a lot of what we know of the True Bruja. Entertaining the notion that Bruja and the True Bruja after her are manipulators of time, the reason why they allowed for Troil to devour his sire was that they saw that kindred society was doomed. They saw the Anarch Revolt, the Week of Nightmares, the destruction of the Council of Seven, the most powerful Tremere in the Viana Chantry. They saw it all. They simply removed themselves from kindred society to become mostly hidden and forgotten and let the Jihad destroy us all. They begin to stockpile their resources, collect ancient texts, and hurry them to their archives. Where they are located, I know not, but I assume some of which was lost in the destruction of Carthage. Ah yes, Carthage. As you know, Carthage was a city ruled mostly by the Bruja to allow kindred and kind to live in peace. Its initiation was encouraged by the True Bruja, you know, infiltrators and spies in an attempt to restore the Bruja to what it once was, to encourage peace and prospering, learning and discovery, and peace and harmony. As mentioned many times before, the Bruja concept of harmony was that mortals didn't fight when the Canaanites stole their loved ones and drained them dry. Harmony was the name given to their death cult. Troil, who ruled Carthage, was its god king, and fed to the idea that the people had to sacrifice babies to feed some pagan god. With the aid of the Malkavians, the Greek Ventru caught wind of all of this and invaded Carthage, destroying the city and its people, burying Troil deep within the sands of Tunisia. Allegedly, this was not part of the True Bruja plan, as they did not intend for the Baali's influence, nor Troil becoming a demonic Fruit Loop. Or perhaps it was, in the hope it would tarnish the Bruja name forevermore, either shaming the survivors or destroying them all in the process. Obviously, neither scenario occurred. They would give up on the violent and angry imposter clan for the most part, returning their attention to studying, research, and rescuing any texts before kind and kindred would destroy them in the wars that would follow, often covering up their traces of the destruction of their own. I heard a rumour that the recent destruction of Notre Dame was encouraged by them, but I didn't tell you that. Their studies and research into the unknown and the supernatural during the Dark Ages would result in an invitation for the Bloodline to join the Tal'Mahe'Ra. I had mentioned them once before to you, I believe, but it would have been a very long time ago if I did. They are not terribly known within our society and, like the True Bruja, are often presumed to be nothing more than myth and folklore. The Tal'Mahe'Ra are essentially an ancient death cult devoted to the worship of a cabal of beings known as the Avalu that sleep in a ghostly replica of Enoch, allegedly. They were promised vengeance against the false Bruja, and most eventually allied with the sect, seeing their goal as logical, and for a time, they pursued that path. This is the basic overview of the sect, as the Tal'Mahe'Ra really needs a night all of itself to discuss it properly. What I shall add is, just like the Ventru and the La Sombra are the ones known for ruling the Sabbat and the Camarilla respectively, the True Bruja are the ones who shaped the Tal'Mahe'Ra into its vision, or at least they believe they did, until the sect began to become more involved with the Jihad, resulting in the True Bruja distancing themselves from the Tal'Mahe'Ra. To my understanding, they are no longer part of the sect. There is a lot to be said about their outlook on the Jihad. No one is fond of it, but the mindset and attitude the True Bruja have has certainly made it difficult for them to work with other kindred. They despise the Tremere, well, like most of us do really, simply for the fact they wiped a clan nearly out of existence. The Tzimisce and La Sombra rose to power, forming a sect through patricidal genocide, and whilst they despise the Giovanni for similar reasons they do with the Tremere, they have similar mindsets. They both distance themselves from kindred politics for the most part, and consider themselves and each other equal in terms of academics. They are also known to be allied with the followers of Set, who admire the honesty in their constant manipulation and deceit. Now, whether you hate them or love them, one must admire how they just don't pretend to be something they are not. The two clans value the respect and fondness of the memory of the first city. I do wonder, though, how their relationship has changed when the Setites joined the Anarch movement. That is, of course, assuming the True Bruja have any feeling enough to care about it. Remember that I said they are rather emotionless, or, more accurately, don't seem to have much attachment to anything that doesn't revolve around their studies and interests. The Guardians are the ones who protect this knowledge in their secret vaults and archives, only allowing those to trust to read what they like. Now, knowledge is a living thing after all, and if it isn't shared, then such wisdom is considered worthless. This is my philosophy, just as it is those who coined the name True Bruja. Now, some True Bruja care for other things beyond scholarly pursuits. Some True Bruja believe that all Bruja had lots of emotion to give, and the antediluvians stole it from them, giving it to the Bruja proper. These True Bruja want to feel again. Failing that, they want the false Bruja to disappear. The True Bruja wish to push back time to undo the acts of Troil's treachery, be it destroying him themselves, or conceiving the second generation to do it themselves. A laughable ethic perhaps, but just think how different our society, and perhaps the future itself, would be if demigod vampires got the idea to wipe out their grandchildren sooner than the Book of Nod hypothesized. I believe these True Bruja are known as, what they called? Yes, the Unmakers, as they attempt to undo this by manipulation of Temporis and slaughtering the Bruja elders. I presume it hasn't worked yet, as we are having this discussion. The majority of the True Bruja see them as fanatics, whose actions are neither subtle or discreet, which can cause the Camarilla pay attention to their existence, which they obviously do not want. Laughably, many of the Camarilla who are aware of these True Bruja assume them to be Bruja anti-tribu. Now, if they discovered the truth, I wonder how many Ivory Tower elders would shit themselves in terror. The Unmakers do have their uses, though. I'm told they are perfect for dealing with the Assamites, Sabbat, and werewolves, in addition to finding out scapegoats and other kindred of espionage. From what I have described to you, you would think there are potentially lots of True Bruja in existence. Now this may well be, as many of them hide within the Bruja proper, trying to lure them back in. I can't say how many of them there are, but I doubt there are a lot. I have been told that there is never any more than 10 of them in a domain, but that could be lies or misdirection. But when in a discussion with a vampire who could time travel, is there really any need for lies? But I could see by the look of your eye that you are very doubtful about the existence of the discipline Temporis. Well, let me tell you something. On the assumption what I have told you is true, that the True Bruja hide and manipulate with time, that they exist in numbers large enough to move around multiple chessboards, you should be terrified. Why? Well, think about it. If a group of vampires are able to operate from the shadows for a good 3,000 years outside the realms of the Jihad, not known by most of our kindred, they are clearly well equipped and incredibly dangerous, don't you think? The Kierseed and Samedi are two obscurities with bizarre origins, allegiances and gifts, but we know more about them than the True Bruja. Now, many presume the True Bruja to be a myth, as the whole idea of their origins just sound like a flight of fancy. I do not blame them, for had it not been with my one encounter with a True Bruja in the 2,000 years I have been a kindred, I too would believe they are a myth or some weird Venju horror story to tell the Bruja if they don't pack themselves in. Those who are aware of the True Bruja fear and speculate about their part in the game of kindred chess, like you may have done over the Illuminati as a mortal. Or perhaps our fear is justified. Maybe they do know when our existence will cease, and they will step back into the limelight from whatever timeline they have squatted in and partake in the mass extermination when Gehenna comes, probably by their hand. Time will tell, I suppose. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, and you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.